So, I want to describe a scenario. So I'm on my roof and I'm riding, and an airplane, a fighter jet, is passing by. And it's so loud that I literally have to put my hands on my ears in order to concentrate, but in order not to have pain. Now this is not sharp pain like when you get cut. This is not dull pain like when you have a stomach ache. It's a mental pain. It's the only way I can describe it. It just hurts in the mind. Another scenario. My wife Diane, who I think each and every one of you knows, is coming to me and comes to my office and say, "Well, honey, I'm going to be out all day, and I'm going to go to yoga class, and I'm going to go teach, and that's it." So I look at her and I say, "I don't know how to process this information." She looks at me and says, "I need you to feed the dog." "Oh, okay." She's not satisfied with my response, with the dryness of my response. She comes to me and says, "Kiss." Middle of writing or whatever I'm doing, and so I'm like, she kisses me, and I'm like, now this is my sign to tell my wife that I did not like the touch of her lips. She's very rejecting to her, but she already knows me. She's like, whoa, I don't have any lipstick. I'm like, still, there's something. What did you eat? She's like, well, I had whatever, bacon and guacamole or whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. She's like, no, I liked it. I'm like, I can feel it. She's like, okay, bye. I'm like, bye. She goes away. My wife craves touch. She's that kind of a person. She thrives on touch. And it's when I am in my autistic mode, I can't even handle the thought of touch. She comes and hugs me or she kisses me, I cannot be present with a kiss. I'm thinking about the kiss, but I'm not present with the kiss. One more scenario. There's somebody I work with. Her daughter is autistic, diagnosed. And I'm helping her to try to understand her daughter's mind from the perspective of practical metaphysics. She knows me through my writing, and she wants help, and I'm doing it remotely through technology. And she tells me about her daughter. Now, her daughter is 6 years old, and she's having a hard time counting to 5. Obviously, she's very smart, she's very bright, but there's something about her, about the interaction that she's having with the outside world that's not quite understood to her mother and to the environment, and they don't quite get what's going on. And so she was diagnosed with autism. And yet, it's very, very different than many other forms of autism that we know. Her daughter, we'll call her Chavale, loves to be on people's laps. In fact, it's better if it's men. She thrives on touch. And yet she's diagnosed as autistic. So what is autism? When you go and you open the DSM-5, the Manual for Diagnosis of Mental Disorders, you see a huge definition of autism. It looks like a legal document. Now, the main purpose for this definition is for people who are service providers to be able to diagnose an individual with autism so that they can either get benefits, health benefits or social benefits, and so on and so forth. Maybe some kind of discount in school when it comes to their tests or whatever, or get into a particular institution that deals with people who have autism. And I'm sure that some of you have more experience than I do when it comes to these things. But something happened with the idea of autism over the last few years. The definition got so diluted that we no longer know who's autistic and who's not. We no longer understand what autism is. All there is in the DSM-5 is the description of the autistic symptoms. And yet if you ask someone, what is autism? Well, it's a developmental disorder of sorts. But what is it? We're describing the symptoms. We're not describing the dis-ease. We're not describing the phenomenon. We don't know what autism is as a collective. That's the truth. Let's put that aside. I want to describe yet another scenario. It's a few days ago. I had so much anxiety. I couldn't even think. Anxiety feels like a swirling sensation right here below the diaphragm. You can't even, it depends how strong it is. It could be that you feel like a 400-pound gorilla is pressing on your chest. If it's light anxiety, it's just like this uncomfortable feeling, right? Very different than grief. Here, swirling, like a hole in your stomach. But similar in a way. Anxiety can happen for many different reasons. That particular day, I had anxiety about what I do, about my work. Whatever the reason was, it prevented me from thinking, it prevented me from digesting the reality, from doing my work, from writing. Now, I'm mentioning anxiety because anxiety is a common thread among all autistics. There's something that happens with autistics that they experience some form of anxiety or another. And that anxiety manifests in many different ways. But what is anxiety? Psychologists, scientists have tried to, for years and years, or more than 130 years ago, Freud wrote a book called The Problem of Anxiety. Why is there a problem with anxiety? How is anxiety different than all other emotions? Anxiety is the only emotion that we generate. The mind, the conscious mind, generates anxiety. If you never lost anyone, when you lose someone, whether it be a dog or a parent or a family member or whatnot, a teacher, it hits you. Grief. Suddenly you realize what grief is. You're receptive to it. It just comes. It's not something that you're thinking about. But anxiety is something that your mind generates. Anxiety is a result of a probability scenario that you create in your own mind about something that might happen that you don't want to happen. Or something that might not happen that you really, really want to have happen. And so we generate anxiety with the power of our thoughts. We're thinking about something that happened in the past and we don't want to happen in the future, or we're thinking about the future and we want something to happen. So, let's park anxiety aside. And let's talk about mythology. Let's talk about alchemy and about occultism, and about these ancient Western traditions that Christianity and Judaism and Islam have developed from. In these traditions, there's a story. And the story is kind of similar in all these traditions. It's told in different words, but it's the same story. They tell us that thousands of years ago, there were really two types of people on the planet. Not one, but two. One type of people was called sons of men. And they were just average Joe Schmoes like you and I know. Now the other type of people that were on the planet, specifically in the Middle East, right, which was the world at the time. These Western traditions. Back then, the Middle East was the West, right? The other type of people were called sons of God. Now, those of you who grew up Christian know these terms. Jesus said, I'm son of man. And people called him son of God. Now, sons of God, these stories tell us, looked different than sons of men. They had different skulls, like really big heads, small chins. And they were able to do things with their bodies that normal people, sons of men, were not able to do. Like lowering their blood pressure on demand, or stopping their heart for periods of time, going underwater, reading minds, doing all kind of cool things. There's stories about Atlantis, that tell us that the people of Atlantis were able to do these amazing things. They were too sons of God. They were called this way by people who were normal, quote unquote, because they had these special capabilities. Now the story tells that sons of God coveted the women of sons of men, and they wanted to mingle with them. And so they married and intermarried, and there was a whole blood thing, and who's who, and just like the monarchy in England, right? Everybody's checking who was born under who and who has what blood. And over time, over the years, the special abilities of sons of God diluted and disappeared altogether. And in a way, that was the point. But the story tells one more thing. It says that one day, years and years from now, and in some traditions, it tells you even when. Now, a new type of humans will rise. Sons of mine. Sons of mine. And these type of people, the story tells, will be able to bring solutions to the problems of humanity. And they're going to be able to do things that regular people were not able to do. And they're going to be able to figure out how to bring it all back and even develop these other capabilities that only sons of God have the ability to do. And therefore humanity is going to walk into a new dawn, a new renaissance, a new consciousness called in various traditions different ways. Christ consciousness, Messianic consciousness, and so on and so forth. According to Hebrew tradition, for example, all this big mess, big fantasy, is supposed to happen in the next 232 years. That is by the year 6000 by the Jewish calendar. We're right now in the year 5878. 778. So that's kind of the story. Now, whether we believe in it or not is almost irrelevant. But the idea holds a particular clue to what autism is. Why? Because when we read scripture, when we read these old stories, and we think about it from the perspective of what is the mental capacity of these people who used to live there at that time, we realize that they did not think in the same way that we do. Now, what do I mean? Second, got to hear myself think. When you read the Bible, you actually realize, when you read the Bible, you realize that nobody explains how anything works. The voices themselves, the narrative itself, when somebody says something, it's actually very simple. It's almost like kids talk. I will give you this, and you will give me that. And everything is spoken in metaphor. Nobody says, listen, let me explain to you how reality works. There's no abstract talk. Okay? Nobody tells you how mechanical things work. Now, the idea, when you study these ancient traditions, you realize that the human mind itself has developed over time. Our consciousness is able to do things now that we were not able to do before. For example, back at the time, the ability of the mind to visualize things, to create imagery in your mind's eye, was very limited. The ability to hear things in your mind's ear, that inner dialogue, or hearing voices, like many of us do, was not there. But rather the mind was just processing reality as it comes. It was a very limited capability in terms of inner visions. And basically what we're saying is that if I told you, it's like, who here can imagine various things in their mind's eye, like, at the quality of a movie? I know Andrew here can imagine cartoons from here till, crazy things this human being can do with his mind. Well, guess what? Back at the time, that was called, I'm a prophet. I have visions. They come to me and they tell me this. And I've seen that. And people listened. Because it wasn't common that somebody will be able to see these visions and describe them. And so there's a progression from sort of like a midpoint, left and right, into capabilities of mind that we did not have at the time. And yet we have no way of going back and measuring that. Because consciousness is individual. It's singular. There is no way you can know how my consciousness works, how I perceive reality. I can describe it to you, and you can say, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like Andrew telling me that, everything in his mind is, basically like comics, right? Like this animated stuff. Extremely visual and extremely vivid. Well, let me tell you, I'm in what scientists call, and I dislike, don't like the name, I'm an ephantasiac. I'm completely blind in my mind's eye. I see no imagery. I only hear inner dialogue. Nothing. I don't even dream in images. I dream. I fantasize. I imagine. I visualize. But I don't see anything in my mind's eye. I can't explain to you how I think. All I can say is what I just told you. It's vibrations. It's concepts. I'm a great abstract thinker. You can equate the method with which we think. Okay? That's a term in Practical Metaphysics. The method with which we think, either in imagery or auditory input, to somebody who's standing right under the sun at noon. You can see everything. If he holds an apple in his hand, you can see everything in the apple because the light is shining on the apple and you can see everything. To somebody who's standing at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, and there's clouds in the sky and there's no moon, and you can see nothing. You know that there's an apple in your hand, but you cannot see it. You can't even see your hand. You can imagine, you can visualize the lines, the contour of the apple, but you cannot see it. That's how I think. And there's an entire range. If I'll ask each and every one of you how you think, there's an entire range within society of the level of the clarity with which we see. And so you think of an apple right now, in your mind's eye. Some of you will see it very vividly in color. Some of you might see it in black and white. People I asked told me they saw it in kind of a blurry like a Monet. And I see no apple. I can feel the apple. I know it's there. But I see no apple. And so the idea is that we used to have consciousness that could only perceive reality but not think about reality. Because to think about an apple, you must have some kind of a thought. It's either a conceptual thought like I have, or some kind of a visual thought of an apple. But consciousness back at the time was not able to do that. And so we've expanded, consciousness has expanded, and we're now able to not only imagine apples, but draw them and do amazing things. Okay? Amazing things with our mind and transfer them into reality. And we can also think abstractly like me. about various things and how they work. When I study metaphysics is so abstract. My wife Diane, who's hyperphantasiac, she only thinks in imagery. She cannot hear an inner dialogue. Okay? Cannot. Even if she wants to. When I describe practical metaphysics to her, she's like, whoa, falls asleep. Because it's so abstract to her, she can't visualize it. She's bored. Her mind goes elsewhere. If you are a concrete thinker, then you'll be thinking about something you can see in your mind's eye. Like Temple Grandin, a well-known autistic, who she thinks in imagery. If any of you have read her books. And so she always thinks about things that are concrete. She's a concrete thinker. But me, I'm not a concrete thinker, which definitely impacts my life and my work. Because I live in my head, I live in these abstract worlds. I can't think of anything concrete in my mind's eye or in my ear because I can't imagine. And so if I build something, I don't have anything here I build. Usually I do, that's why I'm looking. I'm not actually imagining something, but usually I have my podcasting station. But when I've imagined how I'm going to build my podcasting station, I had a really hard time visualizing what it's going to look like. I could kind of build it in my mind in terms of the way it's all going to work together, how the wood's going to come together, the connection, very geometric. But I couldn't see it. And so I had to build it. It's like, oh, that looks crappy. Okay, let me try again, and so on and so forth. So, let's kind of arrange everything I've said so far, because I've said a lot of things. I spoke about anxiety. And I spoke about the fact that anxiety is a possibility, probability of something that's going to happen or not going to happen in the future. I spoke about the progression of consciousness in humanity and about the ability of humans to do things in their mind's eye and in their mind's ears that we did not have before. Musicians being able to imagine, to hear music in their ears and then transfer it to the instruments and do whatever they need to do. And I spoke about the fact that there's a spectrum of in terms of the manner with which we think, between visual and auditory. Okay? So let's go back to Chavale, this girl who's the daughter of the woman I'm supporting right now in this context. Chavale sees things visually. Now, you can't come to a 6-year-old kid and say, so, do you see images in your mind's eye? You know, when I ask adults if they see imagery in their mind's eye, they sometimes look at me and say, what do you mean? Duh, right? I mean, I've known people, because I ask everybody how they think, I've met people who realize that they can't see imagery in their mind's eye just because I asked them. They're like, what do you mean people can see images in their mind's eye? That's how I discovered it. Diane is deaf in her mind's ear. She'll be dancing, it'll be Friday night, and she'll be dancing in the living room, and suddenly the doorbell rings, and I go to the door, and it's a neighbor, and I come back, and I hit Spotify, I hit play again, and the shuffle plays the exact same song. Thank you, Spotify. And they'll be like, oh my God, I love this song. And I'm like, whoa, 5 minutes ago, it was the same song. And she's like, no. But she can be at a store, at a thrift shop, and hold a scarf and tell me, yeah, it's funny. It's like a mentally blind and a mentally deaf trying to communicate. There's a whole skit there. If I wasn't, so I'd be able to make comedy out of it, right? But she can lift a scarf in the thrift shop and tell me this is exactly, but almost exactly the same shade as this dress I have at home. She can see it to that level of detail. Now, how do we tie all this back to autism? Into this idea that autism has become this diluted definition of some kind of a mental condition, a mental situation that we don't really understand. And yet we have to somehow categorize because we see, it's a fact, the people who experience these symptoms of unease are actually suffering within society. Sometimes they cannot speak. how do we tie it all together? And the answer is time. So, practical metaphysics, it's like the science of the psyche, tells us that the only difference in the manner with which we think and perceive reality is our perception of time. And it tells us that we do not perceive reality with one mind, but with two. I'm not telling you that we have two parts of our brain, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. That we know. But we also know that the left hemisphere has a lot of intuitive function, and the right hemisphere has a lot of logical function, and for some people the hemispheres are reversed. So we can't really go left and right. The whole brain, is a mosaic of masculine, feminine functions. We don't really understand how that works. But practical metaphysics tell you, listen, forget the brain. The brain is a reflection of the mind. The physical is a mirror of the metaphysical. It is the metaphysical that's the template by which we operate. The physical reality is just a mirror of that reality. Now, Plato already told us that we are actually two beings. One being thinks, and the other one emotes, feels reality. Now, today, if you ask scientists, there's really two views on how we feel emotions. One view will tell you that it's all evolutionary. Like, oh, we have fear, we have anger because we need to show dominance or we need to escape, and so on and so forth. It's funny, based on this theory, love is not even an emotion. Okay? That's one method. The other method tells you, and forgive me, I don't know the names, definitely not in English. The other method will tell you that emotions are actually created by the idea of the mind. That is, it's only us who is given us names. We have the word anger, and so we know that there is something called anger, and so we develop anger because, we grew up, we know that there's something called anger. That is, it's just our ability to speak that word that has created this reality. Stilo system? Words are the man, right? We create reality without words. And in fact, they will tell you, hey, there's this tribe of Eskimos who don't have the word anger in their language. And therefore, they don't experience anger. Well, maybe. But I bet they experience that same rising heat that we feel when we're angry. They just call it something else. Right? Practical metaphysics tell you, listen, Plato was right. We have two minds. One masculine. I'm just going to do left because for most people it's on the left. So here it is. And one feminine. Now, the masculine mind operates in 3 dimensions of time and 1 dimension of space. I'll explain in a minute. The feminine mind operates in 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. And if the masculine mind is in control of your mental reality, the feminine mind controls your body. And if the feminine mind controls your mental reality, the masculine mind controls your body. One of them is usually in control. In metaphysics, it's called the polarization of your consciousness. You either polarize to the masculine or to the feminine. It impacts everything, even your sexual desire. The masculine and feminine has so much connotation in our society, right? In practical metaphysics, masculine and feminine really means, masculine means directive, going out, deciding what's going to happen. Feminine means receptive, reacting to what is happening. In metaphysics, the analogy is telling a story. The masculine mind tells the story, language. And the feminine mind lives the story. There is no story, I'm just living. So the masculine mind says, okay, my name is Aerez, and I was born in Israel in 1974, and I moved to the US when I was 23 years old, and I did this, and I did that, and I like this, and I don't like that, and blah, 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 and here's the story of my life. Okay? Creates a story of sorts. The masculine mind always thinks about reality. It is the mind that thinks about the kiss. When you're kissing, that is, it's not present in the kiss. You cannot be present in the moment if you're thinking about the experience. It is impossible. Now, you're thinking in 3 dimensions of time. The masculine mind, 3 dimensions of time. You can think about the past, you can think about the future, and you can think about the present moment. But there is no movement in space. A thought cannot be held in our hand. Anger cannot be held in our hand. Fear cannot be measured. Scientists have done numerous explorations of emotion, and they have come to a definite conclusion. There is no specific, unified reaction in the body that can tell you, this is anger. And we know that. There's hot anger. You can burn from inside, but be very, very cold. It's a matter of how you control your emotion that will dictate what your body does. And what you're doing with this fire. You can direct the fire to the mind. Oh, I'm going to show you. Right? And so, no movement in space. One dimension of space means that there is no movement. For movement to happen in a straight line, there has to be 2 dimensions. One dimension of space means metaphysical, beyond the physical. It's like this infinite point from which the universe started, where everything was condensed into one little point and nothing can move. That's one dimension of space. And so the masculine mind, 3 dimensions of time, 1 dimension of space. Now the feminine mind is the opposite. The feminine mind is always present. Nothing exists but the present moment. When you're kissing, you're feeling the kiss. You're not thinking about the kiss. You're not thinking about the fact that you're on stage and talking. You're just talking. The masculine mind is submissive when I'm on stage, when I'm actually present, when the air conditioning is not distracting me, when I'm thinking, oh my God, am I losing my conversation or whatever. The masculine mind is submissive and is just responding with these words, but it's my feminine mind that being present with the experience and controlling and essentially dictating what I'm going to say. I'm not thinking about it. It just kind of happens. And if you're present with the experience when you're doing art, for example, that's the only thing that exists. Time disappears. The feminine mind operates in only 1 dimension of time, the present moment. Because the feminine mind lives reality, experiences reality. If I feel something touching me, if I hear that airplane going in the sky, then I'm experiencing reality. I cannot think, because all I can do is experience the sound. And I can experience it now. Okay? So in the physical reality, we have 3 dimensions of space. In order to interact with reality, I have to move in space. I have to touch something. Everything is 3-dimensional. My brother is in Israel 8,000 miles away, but he's in Israel now, in this present moment. 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time. One mind feels, lives the experience, experiences. One mind thinks about the experience. Now, we travel between these 2 minds back and forth, regardless of which mind is dominant. It's not that people who are extremely present, like my wife, like Diane, it's not that she's not thinking, but if this mind is in control, the thinking mind is concrete. Because everything below this middle point is your body. Everything above this middle point in the X is your mind. So we said before, if the feminine mind is in control, the body is directive. If the mind is receptive, the body is directive. If the mind is directive, the body is receptive. That's why geeks are meek. Their body is receptive.
Oh, they suffer from anxiety. People whose feminine mind is in control, and so the mind is receptive, tend to be very emotional. And the body is directive. They tend to be like busybodies. Do things all the time. Run around. Usually they keep track of time. Now, we can't really divide all people into two types. It doesn't work. We all know it doesn't work. It gets so messy, right? And the reason for that is because consciousness is in fact three-dimensional. But I'm not going to go into this now because it doesn't relate to autism. And so, really, we can divide it into 4 types of people because there's inward, outward, and then we can divide it into 8, and then 16, and then 32. And this is why Jung has 32 and 64 types of personality, and then the Myers-Briggs developed from that, and so on and so forth. But the idea here is that if your feminine mind is in control, then you're directive in the body, you're not so sensitive in the body, and therefore you love touch, you thrive on touch. And if you're directive in the mind and receptive in the body, then not so much. Now, what's the idea behind autism? So now I'm going to completely confuse you. In practical metaphysics, the masculine mind is called the autistic mind. And the feminine mind is called the artistic mind. Because autistic means self-ideology. Autism means self-ideology. Auto means self, and ism means it's an ideology. And so it's the mind that develops an ideology for the self about the outside world. It's the mind that looks and says, oh, I believe in this, I don't believe in that, this is this, oh, this is not a table, this is a table, this is a chair. Develops an ideology. But artistic, art means to be. It's always present. It's the experience. To do art, you must be present. And so we're all autistics, and we're all artistics. And the only thing that really does exist is autistic symptoms of unease. And so why is it that one person feels them and the other person doesn't? Why? That has to do with the potentiation of consciousness, the potentiation of the mind. And the potentiation has grown over time to be higher and higher and higher. We have reached a critical mass in humanity, and the potentiation has grown so much. And so if the potentiation of your masculine mind that processes reality, speed, how fast your mind goes, is so high, then your body becomes just as much receptive. Right? Because if your mind goes way over here, one mind mirrors the other. And so if back at the time, look at dogs and animals, they don't experience pain as they're not as sensitive as us. You pinch, an animal can go through the bushes and run and do things that we cannot do. Oh my God, it would be so much pain if we did what our dogs do. Okay? And yet, this sensitivity, of course now we have autistic dogs, right? But this sensitivity is growing the faster the mind operates. And so this is something that we can say about autistics who are polarized to their masculine mind. Their mind runs so freaking fast. Right, Andrew? It's so fast. And the faster the mind goes, the more sensitive we are in our physical body. And yet, autistics who are polarized to the feminine mind, they're also sensitive. Almost all, I have not met one autistic that is not what I call a sensitoid. But it's a different type of sensitivity. This particular girl that I was telling you about, Chavale, is extremely sensitive auditorially. Extremely sensitive auditorially. But she's not sensitive to touch. Now, I'm not going to go into what senses are acute based on the polarity, because we have 5 senses, and that also has to do with a method with which we think. If you think in imagery, you're a lot more of a concrete thinker, and you'll be different than a person like me who is an abstract thinker. So you can have someone who's polarized to the feminine mind, who's like me, who's blind in his mind eye. Or you can have somebody like Diane, who's polarized to the feminine mind, and yet sees imagery in their mind's eye. And you can have somebody who's polarized to the masculine mind, who's like me, blind in their mind's eye, or somebody who sees imagery, like Temple Grandin. And so it becomes one big mess, one big salad of mental experience. But we're already starting to see a pattern. When there's no pattern, there's only chaos. It's when we start seeing the pattern, as we start understanding things. Now we already know that there's this big spectrum. It's a standard deviation. Most people are in the, everybody knows here what a standard deviation is, like a bell curve. Most people are in the middle, in the fat area of the bell curve. Typicals, mentally typicals. But there's people on this side, people on this side, about whatever percent of the population, and it's growing and growing and growing, who are, their minds is potentiated higher. And therefore their sensitivity is growing as well. And so every autistic whose mind is going super fast, their artistic capabilities are extremely high. They're not necessarily actuated. Potential doesn't mean that you're actually making it happen, but it exists. Your ability to process reality is higher, for better or worse. And so this standard deviation allows us to say, oh, there's this spectrum of human consciousness, and all the way the other, on this side or on this side, we have these people with these acute abilities, with these extreme abilities of processing reality. And it's growing and growing and growing and growing. The more time goes by, the more people are being diagnosed to be on the autistic spectrum. But now we suddenly see a pattern. Oh, there's masculinely polarized autistics. And there's femininely polarized autistics. So if we took all autistics, it's going to be, again, a standard deviation. Not all autistics are super sensitive to touch, and not all autistics are super loving touch and okay with it. Not all autistics are very outward going. Not all autistics are very like, just leave me alone and let me be in my mind. But yes, approximately half of the autistics are what I call mental heads. They're just like thinking, they're in their mind all day and don't express emotions and so on and so forth. They're going to the extreme. I'm describing the extreme. And the other side are autistics who express deep emotions. They're going to be on the floor in the supermarket and like scream and a lot of anger. Okay? Or a lot of fear and screaming and crying. And then touch becomes something that is actually good in some way, shape, or form. But the common denominator is the potentiation of the mind, and let's circle back, anxiety. Because what is anxiety? Anxiety is this possibility, probability of various events that can happen or not going to happen in the future. And so if you're a masculine thinker, if you're a masculinely polarized mental head, like I said, and you're like, oh, you're worried, or you're worried here. Practical Metaphysics tell us that anxiety, when experienced to the femininely polarized, when experienced in the body, because anxiety is a function of the masculine mind, right? It's the mind that thinks about the story. You can't have anxiety when you're fully present. It's impossible. It's experienced in the body as anger. Anxiety in the body is anger, is irritation. When you're irritated, there's anxiousness in you. The metaphor in Practical Metaphysics is fire. It's like, oh, listen, there's some kind of a fire that is happening. Where's the fire? If the fire goes up into your mind is racing. And therefore you're going to experience anxiety as it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do, what am I going to do? You can't think, and then your mind becomes this, just racing. And you can't focus. But if you experience it in your body, it's going to be this energy that you just don't know what to do with. And you express frustration, you express irritation, you express anger. Not to say that people who are angry are not afraid. The idea is that the source emotion is always fear. There's really only love and fear. And in the consciousness movement, some of you I know are part of the consciousness movement, you hear that as well. But really there's only two emotions. Judaism as well. In occultism as well. Many traditions will tell you that really there's only love and fear. Love is the mother of all positive emotions, all pleasant emotions. And fear is the root of all negative emotions that are expressed in some way, shape, or form. So if fear is expressed in the body, there's anger. And going back to that point that I said, that you can't really be present and feel anxiety. We know that from people who've been in the battlefield. And they tell you that when they're actually fighting, they don't have time to be afraid. Think about these words. Don't have time to be afraid. You cannot be afraid if you're fully present with the experience. You can only act. Because when you're fully present with the experience, you're receptive to it. You're reacting to it. You're living it. You're not thinking about it. For us to be afraid of something, for us to have anxiety, we must think about it. It's only in these moments where the shells are no longer landing, the bullets are no longer flying, and then we're like, oh my God, let the battle already begin. If I'm supposed to die, then let me die, but I can't handle this fear. They tell us. So that's the idea. Autism is a mental state, is the masculine mind. In Hebrew you say, השכל הזכרי אוטיס. Autism, otis. Okay? Practical Metaphysics is also Hebrew metaphysics. השכל האוטיס, the masculine mind, is autistics, and we're all autistics. It's when the potentiation of the mind is extremely high, and yet the actuation, the harvesting of the potential of the masculine mind is different than the harvesting of the potential of the feminine mind, is when we start seeing autistic symptoms of unease. Now, your son, I don't know if he's... Does that resonate at all? And feel free to say I don't want to share because he's his own individual. But can you already tell if he's one side or another? It does resonate. It usually is. Because there's some kind of a polarity, either to this side or that side. Now I want to say something about the mental polarization. Mental polarization, I've seen people's mental polarization flip on a dime when somebody enters the room. In fact, I'll tell you a secret. When I speak Hebrew, I'm not autistic. When I speak Hebrew, or when I speak English with a Hebrew accent, my mental polarization switches to my feminine mind. I think slower. I speak slow. I can get human. Now I'm practicing on switching back and forth. Doesn't always work. Especially if I spoke a lot in English and, But yes, when I'm in my Hebrew self, I can kiss Diane and there's no problem. I have no issue whatsoever being present with the experience. I have no issue understanding humor, the subtleties of everything, because we are all two people. It says in Genesis, whether you're religious or not, it does not matter. I'm not religious. But the idea is that the entire story of creation is a metaphor for the structure and mechanism of consciousness. It says, male and female, he created them. Who's them? Adam and Eve? No. Eve was not created yet. Open the Bible, you'll see. Them is spoken about Adam. Now, you don't really say Adam, you say Adam. Because in Hebrew, Adam does not mean someone's name. Here we are again, the masculine mind, the mind that creates language, the mind that tells the story. We have a narrative in our mind. We hear the word Adam, Adam and Eve. And we think, oh, there's this first person, whatever, the story, the person's name. No. This is where language creates reality. Words create consciousness. Adam in Hebrew means human. Human is both masculine and feminine. It is only our mental polarity that dictates our expression. And the idea, and I just want to mention something, I mentioned sexuality, and we're all here are adults, so I'm going to talk about that just a little bit, especially because I know many of you personally, and I know that some of you are interested in this topic. I'm just going to speak a little bit about sexuality. The idea, in Eastern methodologies, they tell you, we all heard of the Kundalini energy. It's the energy that is sitting in the base of your coccyx, and the idea is that you can, through meditation, you can raise it and crystallize your pineal gland. Well, in Western spirituality, they tell you the exact same thing. It just has different names, that's all. And they tell you that there's energy that comes through your head, metaphysical energy that comes through your head, that's the masculine energy, and there's feminine energy that goes through your feet, and they meet at the base of the coccyx. And that we can actually raise that energy through the process of, spiritual evolution. But regardless of raising it or not raising it, which is a very hard thing to do, and we're not going to talk about it because that's superhuman stuff, and we're only going to talk about things that we can understand. The idea is that this energy that goes through your head is actually being filtered through 12 different specific filters, which are corresponding to the 12 zodiac signs in astrology, which is yet another Western tradition, and being filtered to create your personality. And so by the time they're reaching the base of your coccyx, they go through your head, through the thought, and they go through the heart, through various emotions, and then they go through the body, which means you're doing some kind of action, and whatever you did not express through this balance of the masculine and feminine, because this energy goes through both minds, the masculine and the feminine mind, and it goes like this, like a braid. Whatever energy you did not express. So there's either too much masculine or too much feminine energy is expressed as sexual desire. Which means that there's a direct correlation between your sexual desire and your sexual expression and the way you think. Now, practical metaphysics is a new field of research. It is the first time that we're realizing that all these ancient traditions actually have something to teach us that we cannot learn using the scientific method. That if we're going to go and research emotions, and research emotions, and research the mind, and research consciousness, we're not going to get anywhere, because the scientific method tells you that you must measure. That's the second step in the scientific method. It has 5 steps. Well, guess what? You cannot measure consciousness. You cannot measure emotions. You cannot measure thoughts. Even if you bring people into a lab and you make them angry or you make them happy, they're not going to be angry as they are at home. They're in public. It's different. And the reason you cannot measure is because in this realm of the metaphysical, you operate in 3 dimensions of time and only 1 dimension of space. It's a metaphysical reality. Meta means beyond. It's not physical. What's not physical, you cannot measure. So, let's round it all up and talk about what can we do with this knowledge. Okay, so we understand there's masculinely polarized autistics and femininely polarized autistics. So what? What can we do with it? Well, a few things. First of all, if we understand that Chavale is a femininely polarized autistic, then we already know a few things about Chavale. First of all, we know that she's not going to care. She's not going to care how the human mind operates. Why? Because the femininely polarized is always present with the experience. He wants to live. He wants to have fun. He doesn't want to think about how life works. He wants to live life. And so I can tell you from experience, the femininely polarized individual rarely care about how things work. Yeah, they might come to a lecture, they might listen, they might even enjoy it. They're being really present. They're enjoying the joy of understanding something. But the second they walk out of here, that's it. Maybe something resonated. It's not that they're not smart. They're very smart. Well, I say they're more wise, right? There's being smart and they're being wise. People who are wise understand the experience, right? They know how to navigate through the experience. You can be extremely smart, but not very wise. Our society is very smart, but not that wise. Okay? And so, femininely polarized people, like Chavale, of course she's 6 years old, but even if she was an adult, not going to care about how it operates. But we know how we can interact with her. So for example, let's take Diane, my wife. If I know how Diane's mind operates, I know how to talk to her. I know how to create words that would generate a different state of consciousness. I know what she wants to hear and what she doesn't want to hear. And I can operate with that state of consciousness because I can interact with her in a way that's going to be more conducive to our relationship. And so, autistics aside, this knowledge has tremendous power in relationships because usually we fall in love with our opposite polarity. Okay? And so with autistics, for example, with Chavale, I can work with her mother to say, okay, let's teach her how to count using images. Because is it she can't count? Or is it that she doesn't know the words to count? What if you tell her, Chava, go bring me 4 apples. Would she know to bring you 4 apples? Would you say, Chava, can you count to 5? 1, 2. She always skips 4 for some reason. She just cannot remember the word 4. But guess what? She can actually count. She just doesn't know how to say the numbers. And yet we assume that everybody should be able to do the same things. And so there's ways that we can develop through, when I work with autistics, I try to understand how their mind works, and then every autistic person is different. It's like no 2 people stand on the same place of the planet. Consciousness is like a sphere, like a planet. And everybody's different. I have not made 2 autistics that are the same, just like I haven't met 2 people that are the same. And so when I meet an autistic, first I determine their polarization, and then I decide, what to go with. Of course, that can change tomorrow because we're all different. And maybe the first time they met me, they were polarized in a particular way because maybe they were afraid or concerned or whatnot. But then I would develop various methods to help them relate to reality in a specific way that will allow them to thrive in some form or another. Now, masculine autistics is a whole separate story, especially if they're adults. Because they love to understand how it works. They love to get the logic of it. And what I found with masculine autistics, especially adults, that they suck up this knowledge, they just drink it, they want to know how their mind works. And they're like, what they can do is they can take it like a lens, like that red pill in the Matrix. And they start walking around, like, oh, I can see people's polarizations. And I can actually do stuff with it. Oh, because their masculine mind is in control, they have the power to control the experience. Because the masculine mind tells the story. So they can tell a different story. They can decide, oh, I'm going to actually train my feminine mind. Because if I have 2 personalities, if I'm actually 2 people, never separate your awareness, right? You want to split personality. But if I'm going to be conscious of the fact that I'm also another person, then I can actually consciously go and do that. So, for example, I can know that if I switch a language, I can develop my feminine personality. And when I realized that, then I started playing with it. So we can do things like acting. We can do things like learning another language. The French say, knowing another language is having another soul. Because language creates reality. And so we can do multiple things on our own if we're masculinely polarized, or through art if we're polarized to the artistic mind, in order to develop that other personality and to actuate the potential of the mind that has been, for some reason, this or another, neglected. So for example, just to circle back to Chava has an imaginary friend. She sees that friend because she sees in her mind's eye, she's very visual. Well, that friend is really her. It's that superhero that can do things that she cannot do. And through various arts, we can bring out that individual in her and develop that piece of the puzzle, that mental capacity that she has not been able to develop. Because we didn't know how to interact. And because her mother happens to be a mental head, a masculinely polarized individual. She's a single mom. This is, by the way, one of the reasons why many autistics love superheroes. They're obsessed with superheroes. Because they are superheroes. But they must actuate the potential of their own mind in order to become that Superman, that son or daughter of mine. And there's many, many different ways. I can tell you one of the things that helped me the most was meditation. Now, when I say meditation, I do not mean Om. This is Eastern meditation. This does not work with an autistic person who's polarized to the masculine mind. In fact, I will tell you this. An autistic person who's polarized to the masculine mind is exactly the other side of the spectrum than the Eastern guru who's sitting and has his mind blank. So in the East they say, well, you guys are in the West, you have to, you're all crazy. Relax, just be pleasant, just be pleasant. But let me tell you, I was in numerous meditation retreats. And I would sit, of course, who's drawn to meditation retreats? Whoever's mind is racing. And I go and I'm like, what the fuck? These people are sitting and just like, and I'm like, there's no way I can stop my mind. For 3 years, I sat. An hour a day. 3 years. Made no progress. And then I started playing ping pong. Now, there's a way when you play ping pong, if you know how the mind works. That the mind is both visual and auditory. Most people are in the middle. Not like me and my wife. I'm only auditory, my wife is only visual. Most people are both. There's a way with ping pong to train the mind. Within 3 months of playing ping pong, I was able to slow my mind down. Time is the hidden variable of the mind. We can slow our mind down. And it is the goal and the purpose of the autistics, the masculinely polarized autistic, to learn how to slow their mind down. There is no other way. If you slow your mind down, your sensitivity goes down. Because your sensitivity is a function of the speed with which your mind is racing. And if you're feminine autistic, your mind is also racing in the concrete world. You're experiencing reality. It's just like it's all happening all the time. And the ability there as well to slow down your mind in terms of how you perceive reality, which means to find that personality that thinks about the experience and not always experience. So what is autism? Well, autism is this name that we use to describe autistic symptoms of unease. Autistic means the masculine mind that is racing and that is causing anxiety, is that is causing sensitivity of sort, either mental or physical. And it's only a matter of time until we take this information and develop method more and more. Now that we're starting to understand that we're actually two entities, not one. Each and every one of us is two entities. It's only a matter of time until we're going to develop these methods to help us slow down the mind, speed up the mind, on demand, using the words that we're uttering, using the way we sit. There's a way, if I sit, if I cross my legs, I immediately become autistic. Why? Because if my body is more flamboyant, more feminine, the masculine mind takes over. But if I sit like a man, naturally I want to speak here. And so, many, many different ways and methods to do that. The problem is, we are in a group. It's like somebody who is living in a cabin right by a mountain in the woods, and every day he goes out of his cabin and goes for a walk, well, he's always going to go in the same trails, otherwise he needs a machete. We have these grooves that we think with, that we operate, the way we sit. And so what personality takes over? So, that's all I had to say about autism. And I want to just open it for questions, comments, or not.
My mind is like going back and forth between being this sponge and just like, wow, and like racing and thinking about all these other trails to follow down. So I'm not really sure what to say, but
We shall have the air conditioning so I can actually hear you. Would you repeat that?
Sure. I was just saying that for me, in this moment right now, I kind of going back and forth between feeling like a sponge with all this information and just kind of sitting with it and feeling like, wow, that's a lot. And the other part of me that kind of is racing and all these little like rabbit trails that I'm following and thinking, oh wow, that relates to this and that. And so I'm kind of like bouncing back and forth between these polarities, which is a very interesting space to be in. So I'm not really sure what to say, except that.
So I met you once before today,
Mm-hmm.
and I could already tell that you were polarized to the masculine mind, at least when you were speaking to me, because we're all both people, so I don't want to pin you in a hole. Did I just butcher a phrase, pin you in a hole? How do you say that?
Okay.
That word?
You don't want to pigeonhole it.
How's that?
Pigeonhole.
Pigeonhole.
Yeah.
That so does not make sense, but okay, I don't want to pigeonhole you into it. But this ability to think in patterns, to take something I said, and to, oh, this works with it, this, is an ability of the mind that thinks about reality. Okay? So, sponge, yeah. There's so much. There's so much. There's things I haven't discussed here. For example, that we have two types of thoughts. There's thoughts that are self-directed, and there are thoughts that just pop as if from nowhere, right? Intuitive thoughts. Both being handled by the masculine mind, because that's the mind that thinks versus perceiving reality, but they come from two different places. So if I'm directing a thought, oh, I can take this, and this applies to this, and what he said, oh my God, this, we direct it. It's like an algorithm that we work in our own mind. Versus thoughts that are just like, a song just popped into my head. Or an image, if you see imagery, pops into your head. Or just like, oh, suddenly I was thinking about donuts. Seriously, I don't know where donuts just came from. It wasn't me, it was intuitive, right? Maybe I'm hungry, I need sugar. But, so there's more, there's so many layers. Practical metaphysics tells us that there's a template to consciousness itself. Which means that there's a template to the mind, because consciousness exists only as a mental experience. This entire room, me, I only exist in your mind right now. Now, of course, I also exist. But if you were unconscious, you would not be aware of me. And so, for us to experience anything, we must have a mental experience of sorts. And so consciousness, the template of consciousness is really a template of the mind, the way the mind works. And this knowledge, the reason this knowledge is so new is because it was buried in all these traditions, and it was described in all these metaphoric languages. You know, like, there's no, the word consciousness doesn't even appear in these ancient texts, right? And so just now, we're starting to see this common thread between all these traditions, and we are getting, as we're realizing, oh, yin and yang, of course, masculine and feminine. Oh, it's like every tradition says that the Ida and Pingala, right, in yoga, which is essentially the two pieces braiding the Shushumna, which is the center energy channel, the masculine and the feminine. We're two people. Ida is operating one entity of the body, and then Pingala operates the other. So we're starting to see this common denominator, this template of consciousness, and we're starting to see that in the metaphysical, there's only one template to learn, and it explains all metaphysical phenomena, whether it's war, whether it's hunger, whether it's anger, emotions, fear, love, the way we think, mental unease. When you think about things like dementia. What is dementia? Well, if we have a masculine and a feminine mind, this is a mind that tells a story. This is a mind that lives the story. Dementia is an extreme polarization to the feminine mind. You lost the story. There is no story. A woman who has Alzheimer's wakes up in the morning, she has no idea who she is. Not only she lost the micro story, she lost the macro story. Doesn't even know her name. Because every name, every label comes from the masculine mind. But she sees an easel. Oh, I like to paint. How does she know how to paint? How does she remember how to paint? Because it's through the body, it's through the experience. What she's learned through the experience, through the feminine mind, has taken root in the physicality. It's coming from here, right? Through the body. So there's a lot. There's a lot. It's a fascinating topic. And so, thank you. Angel.
You described a few different methods that you use to change your polarity. Your posture, the language you speak, maybe even ping pong.
Yes.
So I have two questions. One is, generally speaking, are those methods generally physical strategies? And then the second question is more personal to you. Are there other methods that you use that you could share?
That's a great question. I find that in general, you have to do something that is a joint operation between the mind and the body in order to gain full presence with the experience. So for example, a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to, I meditate when I paint. For example, Diane always says that, I meditate when I paint. Well, for Diane, in order to be present with the act of painting, she doesn't have to try hard. It comes naturally to her. Well, that's not developing her mind. That's not helping her speed up or slow her mind down. Right? In fact, when she has a lot of anxiety, she doesn't feel like painting. She's not going to paint. Okay. So, I do find that there must be, let's distinguish between strategies to train the mind, to slow it down or to make it go faster, and strategies to change your polarity. Now, it's not like, hey, you take an individual who's never done this before, tell them to change the posture, and voila, another personality pops up. You have to develop that personality, and you have to develop it over time. And the methods are not always physical. For example, the first step is to name it. Because words create consciousness. And if Aerez is Aerez, then there's only Aerez. And so my feminine, mentally feminine and physically masculine polarity, his name is, or my name is Ovadia, which is a whole different name. And the reason I named that polarity is so that I can have an actual conscious awareness of it. And if you don't name, then it doesn't really exist. And so Chava has this imaginary friend, and so we have a name. And in fact, if you actually go and start speaking to people, most people will tell you, oh, it's funny that you say, because I have this kind of different personality that I have that is blah, 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 blah. And suddenly you realize that the vast majority of people really do feel like they're two people. People come to me and say sometimes, oh my God, I always felt like I'm two people. Right? And so the methods in order to invoke that personality vary. With some people, there will be only mental in the beginning and develop into something physical only later. Because some people, there's so much in their mind that going to the physical is not even something that you can do anything with. I mean, it's not going to impact anything because, okay, I'm going to tell somebody, it's like, oh, let's change your posture. They're still in their mind. They're still processing reality here as that original personality. So it's more, over time, we kind of discover things that are intuitive to that particular individual and realize, oh, you like doing this and that. For example, you like to draw, or you like to speak about superheroes. Well, let's find something there that, I just saw a different expression in your face that I did not see until now. For example, if that individual is very, kind of shy, maybe in that moment, they're really expressive. And so I'm going to develop that within that individual. I'm going to say, okay, let's play with that. Let's act. Let's do a show, like some kind of let's act a particular scenario to try to bring out that personality. Right? You can have an individual that is extremely mental and goes to an improv class, and suddenly a whole new thing is coming out. That individual himself is shocked because they never tried it, right? And so it's very hard for me to say this method or that method. Every individual is different. What I can tell you about ping pong specifically is that it's a wonderful, wonderful method for mental heads. That is, for masculinely polarized, because their mind is racing, and therefore they miss a shot every time they were thinking about the game instead of being present. And so this joy of actually being able to do it is becoming the incentive to stop thinking. And because the masculinely polarized have the ability to think about the way they think, sort of like having these two tracks, right? Because they think so fast, so they can actually think about the way they think, versus the femininely polarized, who find it hard to think about how they think, because they're so present that they forget to think about how they think. The masculinely polarized benefit a lot from playing ping pong. So I had an individual, for example, a young lady, 21 years old. She came in and she was like, I can't do it. She was trying to play with her brother, who was also at my house. And we were trying to play. And I said, okay, give me a few minutes with her. And we were playing. And after 20 minutes, she was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. Oh. And then I said, what happened? Why did you miss the ball? And she looked at me and said, and she was able to go back in her mind and to retract. I was thinking about oh my God, and she was thinking about the way she was doing it, and therefore she failed. And so this activity becomes this beautiful things that you can do. Now, another piece of the puzzle is the development of the other side of the body. Because if we're two people, then I'm right-handed. I'm working now on my left hand with ping pong. Because if I'm working on my left, then my right mind is becoming more dominant, right? And so with all these games and activities that you can do things with both hands, over time, we can develop that personality further. In the ancient texts, for example, in Jewish texts, I'm not even going that much backwards, 1,500 years, or even 1,200 years. They talk about these warriors that were fully capable in both hands. In fact, that was the standard. You had to gain mastery of whatever activity in both hands. And the people who couldn't do it, they got the nickname of, they were called Iter Yad Yamin, or disabled in his left hand, or disabled in his right hand. Because it was a known thing in humanity that you're supposed to be operating by these two sides of the mind. Right? And so, yes, physical activities are very, very powerful for that development, but there also has to be, you can't just do that. Because you can take somebody who is femininely polarized, for example, or even masculinely polarized, and train their body to do anything you want. Through training, we become proficient, right? And so the left side will be amazing, and they can become great ping pong players. It's not enough. There has to be some kind of a cerebral, through speech, in order to create a particular reality, mental reality, not just physical reality, that brings out this potential of the other mind. And that balances this inequality between the masculine and the feminine mind. And then literally, You feel different. You no longer have that sensitivity of the senses. This acuteness of the senses disappears. I'll tell you something. Aerez, which is what I call my masculine polarity. I always talk about polarity. When I say polarity, I mean the mind. So masculine polarity has asthma. Suffers from anxiety and has asthma. Ovadia doesn't have asthma. I kid you not. I do not have asthma when I'm Ovadia. I can run and my physicality changes. And the more I develop it, the more I can access it. And the more I practice switching back and forth, the more it becomes better for me. I'm still not in full control. I can be in a situation where I really don't want to be my autistic self. And lo and behold, somebody walks in, especially men, especially dominant men. When a dominant man is in the room, it's almost automatic I become autistic. And so think about us like magnets. We're walking magnets. And whenever the magnets around us cause us to, you know how like magnets, you get them to get closer and you can't because they reject each other, and then they flip. Right? It's sort of like that. Also, when extremely motherly women are around me, I become autistic. But when a woman comes, I have a friend of mine that is extremely feminine, but there's a whole body of knowledge around the way our psyche works that I do not go into and do not want to right now because it's long and but this woman is not very motherly. Let's just put it this way. She's more of she's very sexual. She's very sensual. But every time she walks in the room, I become Ovadia. And I just open my mouth and she giggles. And she's attracted to me. And there's this thing. And we laugh, all of us, me and Diane. And it's just this thing. I just become Ovadia with her. So it's tricky. I can never tell how a person is going to react when I walk in the room. Or how I'm going to react when I meet a person. But practice. So I don't know if I answered you. It's kind of like a messed up answer to a really good question. And I always find that when people ask me questions in lectures, and I go home, I think about it, then I have something else to say. And if I do well, I know how to find you.
No, I got a good answer.
Okay, good. One of the differences in the polarities is that usually it has to do with the third dimension of consciousness. So it's a generalization that I don't want to make so lightly, but that masculinely polarized individuals do not track time. I have no concept of time. Dan always knows what time it is at a 15 minutes, 20-minute kind of accuracy. She's extremely polarized to the feminine mind. I don't. So you can tell me an hour passed and I'll believe you. You can tell me 2 hours passed since you came in here and I'll believe you as well. I have no idea. So I'm just naming that. That's one of the ways kind of determine polarity. A person disappears in time, then they're in their mind versus in their body, because the body tracks time. The body is a natural biological clock. I don't know why, but I felt like I had to say that. You wanted to ask them?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about people who are empathic, because when you're empathic, it can actually change what you're perceiving. If you're around someone who's more visual, you can actually experience more visual that isn't maybe when you're around them versus if you're not. Unless, of course, you're already visual yourself.
Can you describe empathic? What does that mean?
It is when you are actually feeling the other person.
Like empathy.
Empathy, yes.
But it sounds like it's more, you're literally feeling what they're
Yes,
feeling.
you do.
You're becoming.
You're literally feeling. And depending on, so it could be, you can actually feel the anxiety, and of course I'm sure there's variances within that, but that would be, and when you learn about how to work with it, which is very important because then you discern what's yours and what isn't.
Yeah.
And then there's more clarity with just the information. So, but that's another factor that can be, and it seems like that this may sound strange, but it almost seems like the empathic rate is being expanded. I don't know, consciousness-wise. So
I couldn't agree more. I think, first of all, we all see that the polarization within society is constantly and continuously increasing, exponentially too. Between men and women, between liberals and conservatives. I mean, we're just becoming a more and more polarized society. And it's, it's intense. It's really, really intense, right? And I do think that the more we're expanding that range of consciousness, the more we become empathic to other people's vibrations. Now, what exactly that empathic is, so you're talking about actual sensations, right? Some people are very receptive, very feminine in the mind. Some people are very receptive in the... Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Some people are very receptive emotionally. So, again, that three-dimensional model, emotions are inward, they're sensed in the body, so they're in the lower portion. So who's exactly how empathic, in what sense, and what way is based on the polarity is almost irrelevant. Yeah. But I agree with you. I think that ability to do so back in the old days, so if you were like that, then you were the shaman, or you were the doctor, or you were the wise witch who could do this or could that, and maybe you got burned on the stake because of it, right? But nowadays, you walk around and there's so many people who are so sensitive to their environment, and it's actually a skill you can develop. And various substances cause us to experience it more. For example, marijuana. I'm not going to talk about what marijuana does, but marijuana has direct correlation to the way the mind works and the speed of the mind. Sativa versus indica, because the plant itself is polarized. But that's a different topic. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a fascinating topic. Yeah. I want to thank you for coming. Andrew's I want to thank you for coming and for listening and for being a wonderful audience. And I love you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.